Think your Monday was bad? Imagine being dragged through muddy streets, disemboweled and then chopped into pieces, all in front of a cheering crowd. Welcome to the brutal world of medieval justice, where drawing and quartering turned executions into public horror shows. Let's get into the guts of it, literally. Drawing and quartering was the medieval equivalent of a horror movie marathon, only the actors didn't survive. This punishment was reserved for high treason, which back then didn't just mean plotting to kill the king, it could also mean writing a nasty poem about him. Seriously, William Collingbourne was executed in 1484 for a satirical rhyme about King Richard III. Apparently, medieval monarchs didn't take kindly to being called pigs. The process was as much about humiliation as it was about pain. The idea was to not only kill the traitor, but to make them regret every life choice leading up to that moment, and to give the crowd a free anatomy lesson along the way. Here's how it went down, step by gruesome step. Step 1. Drawing. The condemned was tied to the back of a horse and dragged through town. However, authorities discovered that that would sometimes result in the early death of the prisoner before the fun even started. So later, a hurdle, a wooden sled of sorts, was employed to give the condemned a lift to their execution spot. Forget Uber, this was the most uncomfortable ride imaginable. Don't forget, this is something the entire town would turn out for, and they came prepared. By the time the condemned reached the gallows, they were usually battered, bruised, and covered in what we'll politely call road debris. Step 2. Hanging. At the gallows, the victim was hanged, but not to death. No, medieval executioners had a knack for keeping people alive just long enough to wish they weren't. Step 3. Disemboweling. Now for the main event. The executioner would cut open the victim and remove their intestines while they were still alive. And because medieval justice was nothing if not theatrical, they'd burn the organs in front of the poor soul. If you've ever burned dinner and thought, well, at least no one's watching, consider yourself lucky. And the fourth and final step from which this oh-so-gross punishment gets its name, the pièce de résistance, quartering. Finally, the body was hacked into 4 pieces. Sometimes this involved a team of horses to help the executioner do his job. As quartering became more, how should we say, established, clever medieval torture devices were sometimes used to assist the executioner with this thankless job. Once quartered, these limbs were sent to various towns as a sort of medieval postal service, except instead of letters you got an arm or a leg. The head was then sometimes treated with a mixture of tar and herbs to keep it well preserved, then displayed on a spike, turning it into the ultimate conversation piece or pigeon perch. Some of the unlucky folks who experienced this nightmare include William Wallace. You might know him as the Braveheart who fought for Scottish independence, but his end wasn't exactly the stuff of heroic speeches. In 1305, Wallace was hanged, drawn, and quartered in London. His body parts were sent to cities across the UK, making him the worst houseguest in history. And then there's Guy Fawkes. Remember the 5th of November, but also remember that Guy Fawkes technically cheated. When sentenced to drawing and quartering for his part in the gunpowder plot, he jumped off the gallows and broke his neck. Even in death, the guy knew how to make an exit. By the 19th century, the British government finally decided this punishment was a bit much. It was abolished in 1870, marking the end of one of history's darkest chapters. But the stories live on, mostly because history teachers love grossing out their students. And let's face it, few things stick in your brain like the mental image of someone being dragged through a medieval street covered in, well, let's not go there. So the next time you think your commute is bad, just remember it could always be worse. Thanks for watching Gross History. This is Dr. Nigel Islington reminding you to stay curious, but most of all, stay gross.